It starts the moment your devotion becomes routine, when your faithfulness is treated as a given, and when your existence in her world becomes something she never has to work for. The way the human mind measures worth is not rooted in generosity alone. It is anchored in perceived rarity and emotional cost. When a person understands they have unlimited access to your energy, the brain quietly stops interpreting your focus as significant and begins categorizing it as ambient static. This is not malice. It is not even something she chooses deliberately, but the mind instinctively reserves emotional gratitude for what feels unpredictable or finite. Gradually, what she once experienced as deep commitment slowly reshapes into something she anticipates rather than treasures, and anticipation is the graveyard where thankfulness silently decays. As this assumption solidifies, a harmful emotional disproportion takes shape. You start molding your actions around her temperament, her schedule, her emotional fluctuations, while she no longer carries the same urgency to sustain emotional investment. This is the birthplace of being overlooked, not born purely from disrespect, but from emotional security that has quietly slipped into indifference. When she perceives that your dedication holds steady no matter how she behaves, her motivation to nurture the connection diminishes. The human brain is designed to guard what feels delicate and ignore what feels unshakable. Your dependability, once your most powerful asset, progressively becomes the exact quality that diminishes your perceived significance. She stops worrying about losing you, and once the threat of loss vanishes, conduct shifts entirely. The flat line of desire, why comfort without gratitude becomes apathy. What the vast majority of men fail to grasp is that desire does not weaken because affection vanishes. It weakens because emotional polarity dissolves. Emotional polarity is not conflict. It is the quiet recognition that investment carries weight, that choices produce outcomes, and that closeness must be deserved rather than handed out freely. When you perpetually give too much, pardon too swiftly, and stay emotionally open no matter what treatment you receive, you strip away the psychological resistance that sustains admiration. The partnership flattens emotionally. Safe, certainly, but safety devoid of gratitude morphs into apathy, and apathy is frequently what people wrongly call falling out of love. The instant you start stepping back, even marginally, her subconscious registers it before her rational mind catches up. Human beings are remarkably attuned to changes in emotional availability. When the man who always replied immediately starts taking longer, when the one who always pursued shifts his attention elsewhere, when the emotional current gradually weakens, the brain interprets it as a vanishing resource. This is not romantic initially. It is primal. The nervous system detects that something fixed is shifting, and doubt ignites awareness. Where you were previously mentally invisible due to overexposure, you suddenly become mentally prominent through scarcity. Intrigue starts replacing familiarity. This is the point where the psychological inversion begins. When you were accessible, she seldom needed to consider you. You were just present. But once that accessibility evaporates, her thoughts rush to fill the void with uncertainty. Is he frustrated? Has he found someone new? Is there another woman? Does he still think about me? These reflections are not fueled by longing yet. They are fueled by disrupted control. The collapse of assumed security, when her certainty begins to crack. Control is one of the silent luxuries of intimate bonds. The awareness that someone remains emotionally reachable generates comfort even when you are not actively connecting with them. When that access is suddenly severed, the comfort disintegrates, and the brain deeply resists forfeiting things it believed were permanent. As days stretch into weeks, a more profound emotional mechanism begins to surface. Without your steady presence supplying reassurance, her mind starts replaying the past. The late-night conversations, the encouragement you provided, the groundedness you brought, the moments you appeared when everyone else disappeared. Memory is never neutral. It reconstructs itself according to emotional hunger. When someone exits your life, the brain involuntarily diminishes their imperfections and amplifies their qualities. What previously felt mundane becomes exceptional. What previously felt dull becomes tranquil. What previously felt routine becomes secure. The void produces contrast, and contrast is what finally permits appreciation to crystallize. This is the phase where yearning begins to quietly embed itself, not as devastating grief, but as a mounting recognition that something precious is no longer within reach. She might detect it when a difficult situation arrives, and you are no longer the person she instinctively turns to. She might sense it when interest from other men feels hollow beside what you offered without hesitation. She might acknowledge it when minor comforts vanish that she once took as permanent fixtures. The emotional landscape transforms, and abruptly your function in her world becomes apparent only once it has disappeared. And here lies the bitter paradox of being undervalued. The worth of steadiness is seldom appreciated while it exists, but profoundly mourned once it is withdrawn. Reliability is silent until stillness takes its place. The identity fracture, when ego collides with regret. The man who previously appeared common suddenly feels irreplaceable. Not because he transformed, but because the void he once occupied now sits hollow. As the distance deepens, another dimension of psychology activates beneath the surface. One that relates less to romance and far more to self-image and authority. Throughout the relationship, whether she acknowledged it consciously or not, she held a seat of emotional leverage in your world. Your focus, your exertion, your readiness to place her first offered her a subdued feeling of significance. Being selected consistently reinforces a person's sense of identity, and when that affirmation dissolves, it produces an internal unsteadiness. She is no longer the woman who possesses your heart, and that transition can sting more sharply than the dissolution of the relationship itself. People grow attached not merely to individuals, but to the rendition of themselves that thrives inside those bonds. This is the territory where pride begins to clash with genuine feeling. When you were present and yielding, it was simple for her to assume she could reclaim you at any moment, that her gateway to you was eternal, even if the relationship was not. Your emotional openness served as an invisible cushion. The second you strip that cushion away, her mind begins recalculating the stakes. The understanding gradually crystallizes that she cannot simply retrieve you by choosing to. That forfeiture of presumed authority is psychologically destabilizing. It compels the mind to reckon with repercussions rather than ease, and repercussions spark remorse far more potently than emotional pleas ever will. The comparison trap, when your absence becomes her measuring stick. As weeks accumulate, her mind organically begins weighing her present circumstances against the life she shared with you. This is not a deliberate process of wanting you back right away, but a continuous internal audit. When emotional trials surface, she registers the gap where your encouragement used to be. When isolation creeps in, she recollects how thoroughly you showed up. When letdowns materialize in new encounters, she remembers the constancy you delivered. Comparison is the brain's strategy for hunting emotional equilibrium. And frequently, it is only once that equilibrium has vanished that its full weight is recognized. The man who once appeared interchangeable now becomes the standard against which every other connection is judged. A separate powerful force starts coalescing around the perception of lost worth. When you distance yourself and pour energy into your evolution, your existence does not stall. It broadens. Whether she observes it through mutual acquaintances, indirect mentions, or passing evidence of your advancement, the storyline inside her head rewrites itself. You are no longer the man suspended in emotional waiting. You become the man who pressed onward. Advancing forward communicates resilience, sovereignty, and self-regard. These attributes carry psychological magnetism not because they are dramatic, but because they embody solidity and competence. When she witnesses you flourishing in her absence, the unspoken message lands unmistakably. You were never dependent on her. You were deliberately choosing her. This insight frequently sparks a postponed emotional reaction that many men misread as sudden affection. In truth, it is commonly a blend of remorse, envy, and reassessment of your significance. The perception shift, when the ordinary man becomes a significant loss, when another person potentially reaps the rewards of the investment she once monopolized, the brain responds with force. Human beings are hardwired to covet what others covet. Watching you valued by someone else redefines you from overlooked to premium. The identical man who once registered as ordinary now registers as a significant loss. Not because you reinvented your character, but because your disappearance restructured her lens. There is also a subtler psychological unease that surfaces when she acknowledges that you did not crumble in her absence. If a portion of her conviction held that you were emotionally reliant on her, that she was the axis of your contentment, your capacity to forge ahead dismantles that conviction entirely. That dismantling demands honest introspection. Was I more valuable to him than I assumed? Did I miscalculate his resilience? Did I abandon something sturdy in favor of something fragile? These inquiries typically emerge in solitary moments, not theatrical confrontations, and silent revelations tend to persist far longer than loud ones. This is ordinarily the juncture where missing deepens into genuine aching. Initially, she registered the quiet. Then she registered the vanished comfort. Now she starts longing for the man himself. The vitality you introduced into her days, the dependability, the emotional harbor, the sensation of being someone's priority. But by the moment this phase materializes, the equilibrium has already tilted. You are no longer in emotional pursuit. You are no longer instantly obtainable. And ironically, this is precisely when wanting often resurfaces. When what was once abundantly free suddenly feels impossibly rare, frozen in memory. How the brain preserves what the heart dismissed. As the inner recalibration progresses, her mind starts executing something the human brain performs with extraordinary skill, preserving emotional bonds when confronted with loss. Relationships do not merely evaporate upon ending. The neural circuits constructed through joint experiences, emotional intimacy, and everyday interaction stay alive well after communication ceases. While you occupied her life, these circuits perpetually refreshed with each new exchange. But once you disappear entirely, the brain crystallizes the emotional record at its most potent state. The edition of you archived in her consciousness becomes the man who invested, who appeared reliably, who delivered groundedness, not the man who was incrementally dismissed. With time, this locked emotional impression frequently intensifies rather than dissolves. This is the reason she may catch herself dwelling on you without warning, months down the road. A melody, a location, a circumstance mirroring something you once experienced together can activate those neural circuits in an instant. The emotions flood back before rationality can step in. She may insist to herself that she has moved past you, yet the feelings erupt uninvited. This is not mere wistfulness. It is the brain reigniting stored emotional data, and because the final archived version of you is linked to warmth rather than warfare, the emotions frequently arrive carrying tenderness instead of bitterness. The more time that stretches between you, the more commanding these memory activations can grow. The reach-out impulse when curiosity breaks through her silence. In time, many women arrive at a threshold of emotional inquisitiveness, not perpetually motivated by a desire for reconciliation, but by a compulsion to settle the ambiguity your vanishing act produced. The unresolved mysteries still hover. How is he living? Has he found someone? Does he ever think of me? Do I still hold any space in his mind? The brain craves resolution, and initiating contact becomes a mechanism for testing what is real. Sometimes the outreach is lighthearted. Sometimes it masquerades as worry. Sometimes it lands deep in the night when emotional defenses are thinnest. But beneath it all pulses the identical drive to comprehend the loss and to re-anchor emotional footing. What frequently catches men off guard is that by the time she begins aching for you most powerfully, you have typically migrated to an entirely different emotional territory. The distance you maintained for recovery has silently reshaped you. You have reconstructed habits, recaptured direction, fortified your sense of self, and reorganized your world around intention rather than desperation. The anguish that once consumed your waking hours has mellowed into lucidity, and lucidity recalibrates what you are willing to accept. The same conduct you once ran toward now feels unworthy of you. The emotional leverage that once tilted in her direction has gradually equalized, or even tipped the other way. The final reversal. Why your growth is the only strategy that lasts. This is the crossroads where many men succumb to the pull of familiar habits, to re-engage with enthusiasm, to throw open the gates of availability once more, trusting that her longing signals everything is repaired. But the psychology of human connection does not function that way. The very evolution that rekindled her curiosity is exactly what must stay undamaged for admiration to endure. If you instantly revert to excessive giving, excessive chasing, and excessive accommodating, the former pattern reconstructs itself with startling speed. Gratitude erodes all over again. What restored your worth was never the silence on its own. It was the self-honor that silence embodied. The fundamental truth woven through all of this has nothing to do with engineering her longing. It concerns grasping how personal value functions within human intimacy. People prize what demands effort, what enforces limits, and what radiates autonomy. They habitually disregard what feels assured, even when it genuinely serves them. When you permit yourself to be taken as a certainty, you inadvertently instruct people how to handle you. When you step away with composure and channel your focus toward personal expansion, You recalibrate the measure by which others evaluate you. Whether she reappears becomes secondary to the man you forge in the interim. If she reaches out carrying longing, you now meet her from a position of power rather than hunger. If she never resurfaces, you have still recovered your time, your purpose, and your dignity. Either way, you emerge victorious. The man who masters the discipline of walking away from disregard transforms into a man who refuses to subsist on emotional leftovers. And this is precisely why she will one day ache for the man she overlooked. Not because you pleaded for recognition, but because you ceased providing entry without reverence. Not because you labored to demonstrate your value, but because you embodied it. Not because you pursued her validation, but because you funneled your fire into constructing a life that never orbited someone who was blind to what you offered. The distance compels contemplation. The evolution sharpens the contrast, and the contrast illuminates everything she surrendered. The authentic metamorphosis, however, unfolds within you. You discover that love should never demand diminishing yourself, that devotion should never translate to enduring neglect, that steadfastness deserves reciprocal effort, not presumption. Once you absorb this completely, every bond you build from this point forward is fundamentally different. You select partners who match your energy. You uphold your limits. You honor your time and guard your spirit.